First of all, it's been a long time ago.
Long time ago.
And while I hope I have many rivers to cross, I've crossed a lot of rivers since that time. I remember, field reporting is always the thing that I've loved to do the best and the most, and still do. And one reason I'm glad to be at HCNet and have this weekly news hour, and that Mark Cuban, I'm going to give him credit, you may or may not think he's much of a dancer.
Yeah, but let me ask you this about Mark Cuban. I didn't see him dance. I don't know what it's like to have a boss who goes on dance shows, but do you feel that if you were in the same situation, story-wise, that he would defend you differently than you got defended by CBS?
I do. And one of the reasons I'm with him is in our first conversation, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I'd like to work for the closest I can get to a Bill Paley, or for that matter, a Ted Turner. You know, Ted takes his shots, but he loved the news. He backed his people." And I told him that, you know, I'm looking for an owner that, a backer who won't back up when the pressure gets on.
Right.
And I'm not advertising his dancing show. I did tune in last night. You know, I can be dumb as a brick wall about a lot of things, but I'm at least smart enough to know when the boss is dancing on TV, you better at least glance in so you can talk about it.
But Dan, you've had stories on this show, and I've watched a lot of them, and I've been so impressed. It's sort of like 60 Minutes all to yourself. But your investigation into Boeing and the new Dreamliner is going to be made out of these carbon fibers that could potentially be dangerous. I watched that and I thought if this was on 60 Minutes, there'd be a congressional investigation. That must be frustrating for you.
No, it isn't. I take your point because, you know, the reality is on HCNet at the moment, we have an audience that's a fraction of what we had on evening news. But I don't find it frustrating. I find it liberating because for the first time in my career that I can think about the quality of the reporting only,
right,
not the quantity of the audience.
Right.
And you know, that's liberating. I appreciate you noticing the Boeing story, which we got some heat about, and I expect we'll continue to get some heat about it.
But you want heat, don't you? Isn't that one of the reasons?
I do. You know,
you know, you're getting close to something when there's heat?
I think people ache for the kind of journalism that says, listen, we pull no punches, play no favorites, and what we want to find out is what people in power don't want you to find out about, whatever the subject may be. And you know, if we can contribute even a wee, small, microscopic something to that, then it's worth the time and the effort.
I want to bring up something that I was really fascinated when I read how this played out. As you know, over the years you've been called Hurricane Dan and Gunga Dan. And then there was the episode of Kenneth, What is the Frequency? Most people, well, you laugh, but this is really interesting. Most people have all their, you know, jokes and variations. There have even been rock songs about Kenneth, What is the Frequency? But this actually they actually ended up finding out who did it. And it's a very tragic story. Do you want to tell it about this guy?
Well, it went on for years of being...
nobody knowing who did it.
But in the end, they caught the man who did it because he went to the Today Show and there trying to... He was in coveralls and had long guns down his coveralls, that he killed somebody at the Today Show and was apprehended there. And that the district attorney, when he investigated this, the man told them that he had also attacked me. But, you know, sometimes people confess to things that they don't. But let me say this, that there were things that only he and I, that is the attacker, would have known. And he was asked about those in some detail, and he knew those details. So there's no question that they got the guy later, I forgot what it was, at least 6, 7 years later. You know, Carol, I think where you may be going with this, you know, Hurricane Dan, I grew up around hurricanes. I grew up with the mystery and mystique of hurricanes from my...
I'm a weather fiend. I start tracking them.
My maternal grandmother had all the great Texas legends about hurricanes. And I liked covering hurricanes. In some ways, and don't overstate this, but about as close as you're going to get to God on this earth is being in the middle of a big hurricane. But hurricanes, and going to Afghanistan, that Tom Shales of the Washington Post actually wrote a pretty good article, but somebody put the headline on it, Gunga Dan.
Did that come from Tom?
As you go along, you take it as it comes.
Right.
And what I've always said to myself is a version of just keep putting one foot in front of the other and doing what you have a passion for doing. And that's news. And people will say all kinds of things. And you've mentioned, well, some of the coverage this last week has not been exactly adoring.
No.
But as time goes along, I think some of that and some of the people who are writing those things might come around a little when they find out what really went on.
Well, you're in it for the long haul. You know, Castro. What is your take on Castro right now? Are you going to get an interview with him before the inevitable?
Well, from your mouth to Castro's ear.
Yeah. Well, you might. I mean,
I've interviewed him, I think, I don't know, at least a half a dozen times.
But you want to get down there one more time.
Of course I do. Of course I do. And anytime I don't want to play for a big interview like that, try for a big interview that, you call me and say, Dan, it's time to hang him up. But I stay in touch with the story. He did an interview fairly recently, I'd say within the last week, 10 days, certainly no more than 2 weeks,
Right.
in which, given what he's apparently gone through, you could argue he looked pretty good, but he looked older, don't we all?
What do you hear on the inside about how he's doing?
From the inside, first of all, for any American journalist, or that matter, outside Cuba journalist, any journalist, to get the inside in Cuba is very difficult. But as best I can in working sources over the years, is that he's come back better than his brother and others inside the tight circle thought might be the case, and that he was taking it just day by day, but now is out of that stage and trying, given his age and the severity of what he suffered, trying to get himself back in shape. And yes, I would like to interview him again. And from what I hear, I think there's a possibility that someone will. I'm talking about an independent journalist from outside the country. Because Fidel Castro, whatever you think of him, he has a strong sense of legacy. You know, there's a lot of talk around this town about each president, when they reach about a year and a half from the end mark, begins talking about legacy, and as well they should. Make no mistake, Fidel Castro is thinking about legacy. He and Chavez from Venezuela, Chavez has been supporting him, provided a lot of oil to the Cubans. And the only person I know of outside of his own family and tight circle who's seen him for a length of time has been Chavez.
You've covered every president since LBJ.
Actually, everyone since Truman, because I did a quote interview with President Eisenhower. But hold cards out. I met President Eisenhower, interviewed him before I came to CBS News, but only as a pool reporter. But at any rate, you know, Eisenhower, LBJ, President Nixon.
Who was the smartest?
Well, as a graduate and a proud one of what used to be Sam Houston State Teachers College, I might not be the best person to judge. But no, it's a fair question.
No, it is a fair question.
And I want to be thoughtful about it, because I haven't known one that wasn't smart, very smart, in at least his own way. That I think President Eisenhower was really smart. And I think his record, both as a general and a president, would speak to that. It's one reason I think that his presidency's had somewhat of a revival among historians. President Kennedy, unlimited potential, but as we know, after 1,000 days, the potential got cut short. So hard to say. But even people who didn't like President Kennedy would acknowledge that he was smart, very smart.